Imagine waking up one day and realizing the most dangerous thing that ever happened to your mind didn't feel dangerous at all. It felt ordinary. It smelled like disinfectant and dry erase markers. It sounded like a bell that told you when to begin thinking and when to stop. You rose with the others. You sat with the others. You filled bubbles on paper with the others. Black ovals that looked eerily like tiny voids swallowing your questions whole. Imagine remembering your first language wasn't words but wonder. You didn't ask for permission to explore. You asked why the sky behaves like a mood, why ants understand architecture, why rain feels like the world touching your skin. No one graded that curiosity. No one measured it. It was just there, alive and obstinate, a wild animal in your chest. And then, somewhere along the way, you learned to make that animal sit on command. When did learning become the art of not seeing? When did you start answering questions you didn't ask, solving problems you didn't find, writing paragraphs that felt like letters to a person you would never meet? You learned there was a correct way to be brilliant, neat, reliable, predictable. You learned to write your name at the top, show your work, and keep your eyes on your own paper. You learned that the unknown was dangerous unless it appeared on a rubric. Was this education? Or a rehearsal for obedience? Perhaps you remember the day your drawing of a dragon, fuchsia scales, a haphazard grin, was corrected into a realistic lizard. Or the moment a teacher said, "Great idea, but not for this assignment." The red pen didn't just mark mistakes, it drew borders around your imagination, a quiet cartography that told you where not to wander. Who benefits when your imagination is domesticated? Who profits when creativity learns to ask permission first? You were told school would open your mind, and in a way it did. It opened it long enough to pour in answers, then closed it quickly with the seal of certainty. You learned to love the relief of being right more than the exhilaration of being lost. You learned that confusion was shameful, that questions without immediate answers were impolite, that play was recess, and recess ended at 10:43. If genius is play, why does the playground keep shrinking? Consider the paradox. We built an institution to nourish the mind the way a factory nourishes productivity. We standardized everything, the pace, the priorities, even the posture. Sit up straight, face forward, follow along. We declared creativity essential, then tried to grade it with a checklist. We asked for originality, but only the kind that could be photocopied. Is it any wonder that your inner world, once volcanic and strange, learned to cool itself into a tidy plateau? You learned to memorize the map, not to walk the terrain, to collect the right vocabulary for insights you never truly met. Your mind became a museum of exhibits someone else curated. Beautiful, perhaps, but do not touch. The cost of entrance? Your willingness to mute the part of you that wants to scribble on the plaque, crawl under the velvet rope, and improvise an exit. What is knowledge worth if you do not trust your own way of knowing? Somewhere between the bell and the bell, you swapped questions like, "What could be?" for questions like, "What's on the test?" You changed the way you address yourself, not, "What do I wonder?" but "What do they want?" You learned to speak in a dialect of compliance, fluent in thesis statements and topic sentences that never ruffled the air. You internalized a soft tyranny. The fear of being wrong became stronger than the desire to discover. How can an education that punishes mistakes produce minds unafraid to make something new? Think of the rituals: lining up, raising hands, waiting to be called on, receiving permission to use your own body. Think of the hidden lesson under every lesson. The world is manageable when someone else arranges it. Your job is to fit. Think of the way your ideas started arriving, not as lightning, but as weather forecasts. Safe, expected, slightly overcast. At what point did you stop asking if the horizon was real and start accepting its edge as law? The seduction of certainty is subtle. It promises relief from the ache of not knowing. It offers lines to color within and grades to prove you stayed inside them. But what if the ache is the birthplace of originality? What if the discomfort you learn to escape is the pulse of a creative life? What if the test wasn't measuring your intelligence at all, but your willingness to abandon it? Imagine that your creativity never died. It went underground. It learned to mimic the shapes of acceptable thought while keeping a secret rhythm, tapping from beneath the desk while you showed your work. You can feel it sometimes, in the stray idea that arrives at the wrong time, the renegade question that makes your mouth taste like electricity. You swallow it, you keep walking. The hallway smells like disinfectant. The bell rings again. What if the architecture of modern education is not a temple to learning, but a machine for taming minds? Efficient, well-meaning, relentless. What if true education is not something done to you, but something you dare to do to the world? And what if the first step toward that kind of learning is the one you were trained never to take? The step off the prescribed path, into the thorny, luminous thicket of your own curiosity. If you feel an unease rising, don't silence it. That unease is a map. Before we can overthrow the quiet empire that domesticated your imagination, we have to see how it was built. Stone by psychological stone, law by philosophical law. We have to name the invisible bargains, the myths that felt like furniture, the fears that wore the mask of discipline. Shall we peel back the floorboards and listen to the machinery humming beneath? Beneath the floorboards, the humming you hear is not a monster, but a blueprint. It is a design principle disguised as common sense. Make minds predictable, make outcomes measurable, make futures comparable. The hidden problem is not that teachers don't care or students don't try. It's that the very architecture of modern education is built on a metaphysics of control. It treats knowledge like a commodity, the mind like a container, and you like a product on a conveyor belt. It favors answers over questions, speed over depth, and certainty over the fertile discomfort of wonder. The result is subtle, not ignorance, but a selective numbness. You learn to feel nothing where your wildness used to be. Psychologically, the trap is elegant. You were born with curiosity that ran on its own fuel. Then came the economy of approval. Grades, gold stars, admissions letters, extrinsic rewards that trained your brain to outsource its dopamine. Edward Deci and Richard Ryan call it the undermining of intrinsic motivation. Do the thing for the prize, and the thing loses its pulse. You became a professional at sensing what gets rewarded and performing it, a connoisseur of the rubrics that govern worth. If creativity is the courage to follow an inner signal into the unknown, what happens when your signal is calibrated to someone else's applause? On a neurological level, the machinery is literal. Creativity involves a dance between the brain's default mode network, where imagination and associative thinking flourish, and the executive network that evaluates and refines. Modern schooling schedules your cognition like a shift worker. No recess for wandering, no sacred space for aimless mulling. The bell slices your thought mid-arc. Chronic evaluation raises cortisol, and elevated cortisol narrows the cognitive aperture. Divergent thinking, the ability to generate many possibilities, contracts under the pressure of surveillance. It's hard to dream with fluorescent lights over your head and the constant hum of, "Is this on the test?" in your ear. Carl Jung would say, your creative force didn't die. It migrated into the shadow. You assembled a persona, the face you learned to wear for approval. Organized, reasonable, appropriately enthusiastic. The parts that didn't fit the uniform, the appetite for risk, the hunger for the numinous, the instinct to break pattern, were exiled. That's not useful, you told yourself. That won't score. The more you presented the persona, the more the shadow thickened. You learned to fear your own depths because they threatened the role that kept you safe. What does it mean to study poetry if you have to pretend you don't want to set the page on fire? Nietzsche warned about the herd, the anesthetizing pressure to normalize spirit until it's small enough to be managed. Become who you are, he wrote, but the curriculum tutored you in becoming who is acceptable. The Apollonian, order, measure, clarity, was enthroned, while the Dionysian, ecstatic chaos, creative intoxication, was locked in the hallway. You were praised for form, not for eruption. You became disciplined, but disinfected. Was this culture or domestication dressed as dignity? Arthur Schopenhauer divided experience into representation and will. School taught you to master representation. memorize maps, rehearse models, speak fluently about what genius meant. Meanwhile, the will, the deep, unruly drive to push beyond what is given, was pacified. You learn to treat life as a set of comprehensions, rather than a call to contend. Genius, in Schopenhauer's sense, is the one who sees the idea, not just its replica. But repetition pays, risk does not. You learn that obedience is cheaper than originality. Jean-Paul Sartre called it bad faith, the bad bargain of pretending you are only a role to escape the terror of freedom. You learn to say, "I am a student," as if that absolved you from being an inventor of your own meaning. You performed being for others, grades, recommendations, rankings, until you could no longer tell whether your desire was yours or an echo. The gaze of evaluation became your mirror. You became legible and lost. Viktor Frankl argued that the primary drive is not pleasure or power, but meaning. When meaning is replaced by metrics, the soul revolts in quiet ways. Apathy, cynicism, addiction to validation. Frankl's creative values, what you bring into the world, are degraded into competitive values, how you compare to the world. You start to believe that your worth is proportional to your usefulness, and usefulness is defined by a market you didn't design. How can wonder survive when it must invoice for itself? Michel Foucault would take us to the panopticon, the structure of surveillance that becomes internal. You begin under the teacher's gaze and end beneath your own. You don't need a proctor. You are the proctor. You self-censor. You pre-correct. You curate your spontaneity before it risks exposure. Discipline does not rely on punishment. It thrives on predictability. You learn to be normal without anyone having to tell you. Pierre Bourdieu adds the quiet scandal. Schools reproduce the social order by sanctifying the habits of those already in power. Creativity that fits the code of the elite is celebrated as vision. Creativity from the margins is disciplined as disorder. The myth of meritocracy hides the reproduction of what's already merited. You learn, silently, that originality is permitted if it is legible to those who already own the dictionary. Behaviorism hums beneath the theory. Rewards and punishments shape behavior, but the science was never neutral. The variable schedule of reinforcement that casinos use to addict you becomes the algorithm of academic reward. Unpredictable, sparse, intoxicating. You get hooked not on learning, but on the intermittent thrill of affirmation. A hierarchy masquerades as a pedagogy. The culture surrounding school adds anesthetic. Aldous Huxley imagined a world where control didn't require shackles, only pleasures that exhausted the appetite for risk. The modern version is subtler, a life calibrated to be comfortable enough that you never ask dangerous questions. Screen-mediated distraction fills the space where boredom might have sparked originality. The school day mimics the app economy. Constant switching, shallow focus, no incubation. Your attention becomes fragmented. Your ideas never get a chance to thicken. Beneath it all lies a philosophy rarely admitted, that humans are instruments. The Frankfurt School called it instrumental reason, the reduction of meaning to utility. If knowledge can't be traded, it is a luxury. If thought can't be graded, it is a threat. Standardization is sold as fairness, but it achieves fairness by trimming difference. Equality is confused with sameness, and the particularity of your mind is rounded down until it fits into a spreadsheet. What happens to a culture that confuses compliance with character? The hidden force is fear, fear of chaos, of failure, of the unprofitable, of the child who won't be managed. Fear decides that creativity is too dangerous to leave unregulated and too valuable to leave unexploited. So it engineers a compromise. Simulate creativity inside a controlled environment. Assign imagination. Grade spontaneity. Schedule innovation between the second period and lunch. You're free to be original, so long as originality looks like a tidy case study. And you? You learn to smile at the rubric, to speak in the grammar of certainty, to swallow the unsayable. You learn to ask yourself not, is this true, but will this be accepted? Slowly, the map becomes the world. Slowly, the shadow forgets it contains light. Slowly, the machine doesn't need to run anymore. You run it yourself. We have named the architecture. We have traced its psychology and heard its philosophy mutter in the pipes. But the design would remain an abstraction if it did not seep into daily life, into the way you choose your work, love your people, narrate your failures, and vote your fears. When an institution colonizes your attention, it colonizes your reality. The final test is not in a classroom. It is in the shape your life takes without anyone needing to grade it. Shall we step into the corridor where this blueprint turns into behavior, the unseen consequences that have been scripting you all along? Step into the corridor and watch how the blueprint becomes breath. It's in the way your calendar fills itself with obligations that feel like déjà vu. It's in the tone you adopt in emails, warm, helpful, careful, as if each sentence were another Scantron bubble to darken just enough to be acceptable. You don't say what you think, you say what will pass. When inspiration knocks, you check the schedule. When the question rises, volcanic and unruly, you ask it softly, if at all. You used to ask, what if? Now you ask, where does the A go? You tell yourself you are being responsible. Somewhere, the child who loved to draw dragons with fuchsia scales watches you file the edges off your own voice and wonders when you decided safety was more honest than truth. The meeting is a ritual where you feel this, even if no one names it. Someone says, let's brainstorm, and markers squeak across pastel sticky notes. But you know the choreography. Ideas must be original enough to feel new, not so alive they threaten a deliverable. You censor yourself in anticipation of the room's temperature. This is evaluation apprehension, the fear that your worth is being measured with every sound you make. The amygdala scans for danger, firing at the prospect of social risk, while groupthink wafts through the room like a calming fragrance. Status quo bias anchors everyone to what already works, and the sunk cost fallacy keeps bad plans alive because too much has been invested to admit the wrongness. Production blocking, the simple fact that only one person can speak at a time, turns a torrent of thoughts into a careful queue. You leave with a neat stack of notes and a quiet grief. You were present, but not fully. In private, the consequences hide in the mirrors you've learned to trust. You scroll past lives staged like report cards, promotions framed as destiny, productivity as personality. You feel the tug to brand yourself, to craft a bio that translates your soul into marketable keywords. You optimize your days according to someone else's dashboard. Objectives and key results become the new grades, and you chase them with the same hungry mix of fear and hope. Hedonic adaptation ensures that each win decays into neutrality faster than you expected. You need a bigger win next time for the same relief. Meanwhile, imposter syndrome whispers that you are a counterfeit, and the Dunning-Kruger effect plays ugly games. The less certain you feel, the more expertise you acquire. The more expertise you have, the more acutely you notice your limits. School taught you to find answers quickly. Life keeps handing you questions that cannot be graded. What do you do when your identity was built on being right in systems designed to be simpler than reality? Walk into your relationships and you'll see the same fingerprints. You catch yourself correcting your partner's story because it doesn't match the rubric in your head. You notice your child's way of thinking, messy, non-linear, defiant, and you feel a reflex to carve it into something more manageable. Color inside the lines, you say without saying it, because that is what love sounded like when approval was its currency. At dinner, someone asks a question that doesn't have a correct answer and the table goes quiet. You all wait for a proctor who never arrives. The hidden curriculum of school, be agreeable, be efficient, be legible, colonizes intimacy. The cost is subtle. People feel managed instead of met. The wildness you fell in love with in others becomes the very thing you domesticate. You want closeness, but the only tools you were given are rubrics and revisions. Zoom out. Society becomes a multiple-choice test written in permanent marker. Political discourse condenses into slogans because nuance doesn't format well for timelines. Confirmation bias does the heavy lifting. You only follow accounts that prove your priors correct so you can feel the cozy hit of righteousness. The algorithm, that invisible teacher, learns what grants you the gold star of attention and feeds you more of it. Ambiguity aversion makes complexity feel like a threat, not a chance to refine your vision. Moral grandstanding turns participation into performance. Say the right words at the right time with the right cadence, and you are graded as good. You substitute signaling for courage and wonder why everything feels both loud and empty. When education teaches that every question has one right answer, democracy becomes the theater of simpler answers delivered louder. At work, innovation is an aesthetic. You attend hack days. You write on glass walls. You use terms like disruption and blue sky. But you can feel the invisible rails. Loss aversion ensures bold ideas die early. Stakeholders fear what a failed experiment will cost more than they desire the electricity of something that could change the game. KPIs reward incremental improvements that display progress in graphs, not ideas that require a season of uncertainty to germinate. You learn to reverse engineer inspiration so it fits the quarterly narrative. First the deck, then the idea. PowerPoint becomes the format for thinking itself. Bullet points chopping the wild vine of a concept into digestible pellets. The organization says it wants mavericks. The performance review rewards shepherds. You don't need to be told to stay in line. Your bonus will do that for you. Inside your body, the architecture is carving grooves. Chronic evaluation keeps your stress response humming at a low grade. Cortisol trickling, then flooding when the stakes feel high. Your hippocampus, that gardener of memory and context, learns to prioritize what is urgent over what is deep. You multitask, but what you're actually doing is task switching, leaving attentional residue behind like fingerprints on glass. The default mode network, the constellation that lights up when you daydream, wander, and synthesize, has fewer uninterrupted stretches to weave. You have trained yourself to fill boredom instantly, so the fertile emptiness that births originality is paved over with scrolls. Your nervous system becomes a manager, not a muse. Sometimes, late at night, when the devices rest and the house breathes, you feel a thrum of something trying to assemble itself in the quiet. You reach for your phone anyway. It's safer to consume than to conjure. The consequences reach into failure and twist it into a verdict. Learned helplessness creeps in. After enough cycles of doing what you were told to do and not receiving what you were told you'd receive, you stop experimenting. You call it realism. It's fatigue. You accept the narrow corridors of how it's done and smile when newcomers try to widen them. You speak in shoulds because they sound like wisdom. I should follow the best practices. I should wait until I'm ready. I should get permission first. Best practices are just old answers with a good reputation. But the cost of reverence is relevance. The future is never built by people who worship the present tense. Perhaps the most painful consequence is the one you can't Instagram, the erosion of private meaning. You outsource your taste to consensus and call it culture. You don't ask, what do I love, but what is loved right now? Your playlists, your opinions, your plans, curated by a logic that values predictability. You feel the quiet ache of a life that is efficient at everything except aliveness. The paradox is brutal. The freedom to choose among a million options becomes a prison whose bars are invisible because they are made of praise. The most terrifying cage is the one you gladly decorate. If you feel cornered by these sentences, you are not being condemned, you are being seen. The machine's genius is that it makes you feel like your captivity was your idea. That's why rebellion feels dangerous, even when it's necessary. The stakes are not grades anymore, they are your days. The experiment has run long enough to prove its outcomes. A culture that manufactures competence while starving originality. A self that can perform anything except its own beginnings. But what if the very instincts that got you here, the discipline, the sensitivity to structure, the hunger to master, could be inverted, redirected, rewired into tools for escape? What if the same brain that learned to predict could learn to risk? What if the school inside your head could be dismantled, not by rage but by a deeper form of intelligence? one that honors both the dragon and the rubric, but lets the dragon choose when to breathe. Rebellion does not begin with arson. It begins with resignation, the resignation of the inner proctor, the quiet, deliberate act of stripping the invigilator from your mind and handing the keys back to the part of you that draws dragons with fuchsia scales. This is not chaos. It's a higher discipline. It is choosing standards that are alive over standards that merely look clean. It is refusing to be graded by metrics that cannot feel. The paradox is severe. To become truly free, you will need better rules, yours. Start by separating the two gods you were taught to fuse into one, the one who explodes and the one who edits. Your school trained you to draft and grade in the same breath, to ask the Dionysian to dance while the Apollonian stands by with a clipboard. That is a cruelty. Make a studio with 3 chairs. Chair 1, the explorer, who wanders and breaks and multiplies. Chair 2, the sculptor, who refines and deletes. Chair 3, the witness, who sees what this work wants to be for others. Never let them sit at the same time. Protect the explorer like you would a fire in the rain. Invite the sculptor only when there is something to shape. Call the witness when you are ready to give it away. Most creative block is just the wrong chair speaking out of turn. The next act of disobedience is to break the surveillance. You cannot be original while being watched, especially by yourself. Find or build spaces where nothing is for publication. Private notebooks, password-protected drafts, projects that will not be shown for 90 days. An unpublished rule is not a retreat, it is a greenhouse. Foucault's panopticon dissolves when you deny it your gaze. Reserve portions of your life where metrics can't enter. Call it a privacy budget. Spend it daily. You are colonized by outcomes. Replace them with games. When everything becomes a goal, curiosity suffocates under the weight of expectation. Turn your work into systems that generate joy, regardless of result. A writer might commit to 5 sentences after a long walk. A painter to 40 ugly thumbnails before 1 keeper. An entrepreneur to 3 attempts to break our own product each week. Wager with yourself in terms of moves, not trophies. The reward is the play itself. DC and Ryan's research on intrinsic motivation can be inverted into practice. Strip your projects of prizes that make them behave. They will return to their wild gait. Reclaim boredom. The white space you've learned to fear is an organ of cognition. Schedule nothing the way you schedule everything else. Long walks alone without a phone, 20 minutes beyond the urge to check. A weekly idea Sabbath, where you consume nothing new and let your mind startle itself with the echo of its own voice. Neuroscience won't flatter you. Your default mode network needs uninterrupted stretches to braid disparate experiences into insight. Silence is not the absence of information. It is the soil that makes information edible. Install constraints that bite. It sounds counterintuitive, but freedom blossoms inside the right fences. Write a story without adjectives. Design with 2 colors. Compose a melody using only a pentatonic scale. Pitch a product without mentioning the problem it solves. Constraints are not shackles. They are lenses that force you to see the overlooked. Picasso mastered realism long before he destroyed it on purpose. The sonnet's tight cage birthed centuries of thunder. Set your own cages, then rattle them. Train wrongness. You are punished so often for mistakes that your nervous system equates novelty with danger. Invert the equation. Create a wrongness quota. 10 deliberately bad ideas before lunch. A weekly ritual called the Museum of Rejected Work, where you display failures with ceremony. Keep an anti-portfolio, a list of risks taken, outcomes be damned. The goal is not self-humiliation, it is inoculation. Exposure therapy for the artist. Beethoven preserved thousands of messy sketches because he understood. The myth of genius is a spotless floor. Real genius is a workshop with shavings everywhere. Rewire identity from student to maker. Sartre's bad faith dissolves each time you choose action over role. Stop preparing to be and start being. Launch a tiny offering to the world every month. A zine, a prototype, a micro concert on your street, a tool that solves your own annoyance, and let reality correct you. Apprenticeship beats abstraction. Go learn a craft in public, where materials and people push back. The Wright brothers crashed more than they coasted. They learned aerodynamics from the stubbornness of air. Alter your reward circuitry. Praise is a sugar high. Meaning is protein. Adopt Frankel's lens and ask of your work, whom does this help breathe? Meaning tightens your vector when applause gets noisy. Keep a ledger of 3 metrics your formal education ignored. Risk taken, curiosity fed, generosity offered. Score yourself not on reach but on resonance. Did one real person change their day because you existed? The market will have its say in time. Meaning must be nourished now. Gather a council that grades nothing, speaks plainly, and loves the work more than your ego. Pixar's brain trust did not soothe, it sharpened. You need a small circle trained to give notes, not verdicts. This moment felt thin. The tension dipped here. Where is the dragon? Set candor as a ritual. You are not seeking consensus, you are hunting perspective. Bourdieu's insight that culture replicates itself can be countered by choosing voices from outside your class, industry, and comfort zone. A council of difference is a vaccine against conformity. Integrate the shadow. Jung warned that what we exile rules us. Invite the disowned parts back to the table through practice, not poetry. A monthly conversation with your shadow in writing. What did I forbid myself this month? What did I envy? Where did my persona speak instead of my gut? Then schedule a small, contained ritual of reclamation. Perform a piece in a style you secretly disdain. Spend a day making quantity instead of quality. Say the dangerous sentence in a room that can withstand it. The goal is intimacy with the parts that scare you, a dialogue that converts threat into energy. Let your body back into the room. Modern schooling taught you to treat thinking as a neck-up affair. Creativity is embodied. Walk until your ideas change temperature. Read your drafts out loud and watch your breath for the sentence that steals it. Draw with your non-dominant hand to scramble fluency and rediscover seeing. Build prototypes with your fingers, not just your software. Genius is not an IQ score. It is a nervous system trained to notice. Relanguage your life. Words are cages or keys. Replace assignment with experiment. Deadline with lifeline. When a project matters, should with could. Mistake with surprise tax. Success with signal. The grammar of your days dictates the physics of your choices. Nietzsche's imperative, become who you are, requires that you stop talking about yourself like a compliant object and start narrating yourself as a creator with obligations to the not yet. Most of all, choose a problem worthy of your devotion. Huxley warned about pleasures that pacify. Pick a question that refuses sedation, something that makes you feel both too small and precisely required. Work at a scale that scares you into humility and focus, a garden that feeds a neighborhood, a platform that dignifies overlooked voices, a technique that renders the invisible visible. Schopenhauer's will is not evil when married to service. It becomes a current you can surf, rather than a riptide that drags you under. These acts of rebellion won't be celebrated by bells. There will be no grades, no trophies, no institutional hand-taking credit for your ferocity. There will be mornings when you ache for the comfort of rubrics, nights when the old proctor whispers that you are ruining your life. Endure. The machine inside you was built over years. Its dismantling is not an event but a practice. You are building a studio inside your days, brick by disobedient brick. And yet, there is a deeper pivot than tactics, a realization that rearranges the furniture of your mind in a way no routine can. It is the truth that turns methods into music, the insight that makes rebellion not an attitude, but a way of seeing. If you're ready, we can walk there. Here is the turn you've been circling, the truth that refuses a rubric. Creativity is not something you do, it is how you are alive. It is not a department of your mind, not a hobby, not a luxury to schedule after the emails are answered. Creativity is your original relationship to reality. It is the discipline of staying in contact with the unknown without anesthetizing yourself with premature certainty. You are trained to treat uncertainty as an enemy. The revelation is that uncertainty is the only homeland where anything worth finding can be found. Look at the etymology that was hiding in plain sight. Authority and authors share a root. Modern education taught you to seek authority outside, a standard, a score, a figure to please. The deepest shift is to reclaim authorship, not the posture of rebellion for its own sake, but the sober acceptance of responsibility. You are the one who must confer meaning. You are not waiting to be approved into yourself. The teacher you've been seeking is not a person, it's a posture. Authorship is not a crown, it is a vow. Once you see this, the world tilts. Reality is not a finished product you're graded on for accurate recall. It is a draft you co-write. The page of your day is not blank because no one assigned it. It's blank because you were given the terrifying privilege to make marks only you can make. The mind is not a container. It is an instrument that tunes the world by the way it attends. You think you are looking at life, but you are also coloring it, composing it, co-creating the field in which it appears. What you notice changes what is possible. What you love reorganizes the space around it. This is the final paradox that clarifies all the others. Creativity is not primarily about expression. It is about devotion. You do not create to be seen, you create to see. To attend so fiercely that the ordinary opens. To love something enough to give it a better form. Frankel's meaning, Nietzsche's becoming, Jung's shadow, all of them point here. The creative life is an ethical stance. I will leave this corner of the world more alive than I found it. Sometimes that corner is a canvas. Sometimes it is a conversation, a spreadsheet, a sidewalk garden, a policy that dignifies someone who was invisible 5 minutes ago. And so the machine you survived becomes legible. It did not destroy your creativity. It taught you to misplace it. It told you creativity was a product rather than a process, a spectacle rather than a metabolism. It taught you to outsource the spine of your choices to a rubric. But under that pressure, you forged capacities you can repurpose. The endurance to sit with difficulty, the grammar to shape chaos, the patience to iterate, the humility to learn. The red pen becomes a tool you wield with mercy. The bell becomes a clock you set for deep work. The proctor becomes a guardian of your studio who speaks only when invited. You are not rejecting all you learned. You are reassigning it to serve a different sovereign. Freedom does not mean absence of constraint. It means intimacy with the right constraints. The artist who vows a sonnet is freer than the artist who vows nothing. The entrepreneur who commits to solving one real problem for one real person is freer than the one who chases every investor's mood. The educator who decides that wonder is the learning objective is freer than the one who obeys every standard but never saves a soul. When you choose your constraints, your vows, they become rails that carry your ferocity farther than chaos ever will. Let the revelations settle into your body. You are the school now. You are the curriculum, the classroom, the teacher, and the student. The test is not timed, it is constant. It is asked by your days, are you present? Are you brave? Are you generous? The grades are not letters, they are the quiet consequences. Aliveness or numbness, resonance or performance, contribution or choreography. The diploma is the trail of changed lives, including your own. What do you do with a truth like that? You stop asking for permission to begin. You replace, is this good? With, is this alive? You rephrase success as, did I risk something real on behalf of what I love? You sit your 3 chairs, the explorer, the sculptor, the witness, and you invite them one at a time, like old friends who know the order of the ritual. You keep your privacy budget intact, so your soul has a place to stumble without spectators. You return to boredom like a pilgrim returns to water. You turn envy into a compass and fear into a tutor. You practice failing loudly enough that your nervous system learns to hear courage over catastrophe. You name a vow and let it shepherd your days. The culture may keep dancing around its glass walls, shouting, innovation. while measuring only what can be counted. That is not your weather anymore. You will live by different barometers. Does your work increase someone's courage to be themselves? Does your presence make the room more honest? Does your attention allow what is ignored to become undeniable? You will be tempted to prove yourself with spectacle. Resist. Spectacle is a flame that consumes its fuel quickly. Devotion is a hearth that burns through winters. Here is a simple practice to anchor this truth without turning it into a slogan. Each morning, ask 3 questions. What am I willing to see today that I usually avoid? What small risk would make me more real by nightfall? Which one person can I help breathe easier through something I can make? At night, audit, not for achievement, but for aliveness. Did you meet the day as an author or as an applicant? Did you remain in contact with the unknown long enough to be changed? You might worry that reclaiming authorship will make you lonely. Sometimes it will, but you will find your kin in unexpected places. The gardener who refuses pesticides and learns the temperament of soil by touch. The nurse who slips poetry into charts by the way she listens. The coder who writes tools that help outsiders build without asking for entrance first. The teacher who smuggles wonder into the lesson plan and measures success in eyes, not scores. They are everywhere, unspectacular and unstoppable. Their diploma hangs in the air around them, more life given freely. And when the old ghosts return, the proctors whisper, the algorithms chorus, the bell that claims to own your time, you will remember, the bell was always in your hand. The door was never locked. The dragon did not die. It was waiting for oxygen. Open a window, crack your knuckles, put your ear to the page, the block of wood, the blank screen, the problem nobody believes is worth solving, and listen for the specific thrum that means yours. Then begin where beginnings always happen. At the first honest move, too small to brag about and too alive to deny. Step out of the corridor into the day. The city does not need more credentials. It needs your risk, your tenderness, your rigorous attention. Plant a question in the concrete. Build the thing you wish existed. Teach the class you were denied, even if it's 3 humans under a tree. Write the sentence that makes you sweat. Offer the prototype that might not work. Refuse to wait for a bell to tell you it is time to be yourself. If anyone asks what you are doing, tell them the truth. I am graduating. I am becoming the author I have been deferring to others. I am letting my creativity do what it was born to do. Make reality more real. Then ring your own bell and begin.